Okay, good morning and good afternoon, wherever you might be. Welcome to the Shorenstein Asia Pacific Research Center Japan Programs webinar. My name is Kyoto Tsutsui, and I'm the director of the Japan program at Stanford University's Asia Pacific Research Center Japan program. Today's webinar is about an important topic of digital transformation in Japan. Much has been said about the need for Japanese government and corporate offices to update their digital infrastructure so that people can process paperwork more efficiently online without having to use physical hanko stamps or fax machines. Toward that end, Japanese government established the Digital Agency in September of 2021 to push forward the stagnant efforts toward digital transformation. And I'm delighted to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Karen Makishima, who was spearheading those efforts as the digital minister until a few months ago. And she continues to engage with policy issues related to Japan's digital transformation. Karen Makishima, Dr. Makishima, is a member of the House of Representatives in Japan from Kanagawa Prefecture's 17th district, having won 4 consecutive elections there since 2012 as a member of the Liberal Democratic Party. So this year marks the 10th anniversary of her becoming a Diet member. And already within those 10 years, she has served in multiple ministerial roles. In addition to the digital minister that I just mentioned, she held the positions of minister in charge of administrative reform and the minister of state for regulatory reform and so on. And she has had close connections with the United States, having earned a graduate degree at George Washington University and having also graduated from the Women's Campaign School at Yale University. She also worked at the Washington, D.C. office of NHK, Japan Broadcasting Corporation. So she spent a good deal of time in the US. And also importantly, she has a bachelor's degree and also a doctoral degree in public administration from the International Christian University in Japan. And we look very much forward to our conversation with her about where Japan's digitalization is today and where it's going in the coming years. And in this important conversation, we are delighted to have the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace as a co-organizer, co-sponsor of this event. And also to have, especially to have senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment, Dr. Kenji Kushida, who will be the main interlocutor with Minister Makishima today. Kenji, well, Dr. Kushida, is a familiar face to us all at APAC, having been a research associate for many, many years here and contributed to our activities quite a bit. And he's now, he has a doctoral degree from University of California, Berkeley in political science, and he's now at the Carnegie Endowment, running Japan-related research under the theme of Innovative Japan, Global Japan. So I will pass the microphone to Dr. Kushida now, but I'd like to mention that we welcome your questions from the audience to Minister Makishima or to Dr. Kushida. So please feel free to send them our way via the Q&A function in Zoom. So without any further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Kenji Kushida and Dr. Karen Makishima for a conversation on digitally transforming Japan. Please, Kenji, take it away.
Thank you, Kyo. So first of all, thank you to Stanford Shorenstein APARC Japan program and Dr. Kyoto Tsutsui for co-hosting this session. Most of all, thank you to Dr. Makishima for joining us early in the morning in Tokyo. I personally and Carnegie are delighted to partner with you. So I'd like to first spend a couple minutes setting up the discussion by framing some of the issues at hand, because a broader point that's often underappreciated in understanding Japan and how it's changing, but not just understanding Japan. It's about how often when things are changing, there's new, traditional, and hybrid elements that coexist. So in the case of Japan, a lot of people looking in from the outside, maybe if they're looking for things to criticize or things that haven't changed, they can focus on just things that haven't changed and then conclude that not much has changed. Or you can look at the new aspects and say, look, everything has changed. But actually, the traditional aspects and new aspects often coexist. And then there are aspects that are hybrid, they're mixed. And so a more objective view is to understand that if you're looking for change, you look at the new parts and how they affect the traditional parts, and then also look at the hybrid parts. So the Japan programming at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace is focused on global Japan, innovative Japan. And today we're talking about digitally transforming Japan. Right? And of course, if we're familiar with Japan, there's lots of famously traditional analog aspects like the physical hanko, fax machines. They're often still used depending on where you look. But there's also a lot of underappreciated aspects of new digital Japan. Also, in the big picture, the demographics and aging and shrinking population leading to severe labor shortages, these are actually opportunities for technological advancement and widespread deployment, which is starting to happen. So today we have this wonderful opportunity to take a deep dive into some of the things that the Digital Agency has done. It celebrated its first birthday on September 1st, and for most of that first year, Dr. Makishima was the minister. And just a couple of the things to highlight, and we'll deep dive. The Digital Agency that it did, it selected global cloud providers for Japan's government cloud, which plugs Japan into global digital IT fabric. It enables lots of things that couldn't be done before with the local fragmented IT systems. Startups and other firms can plug in and offer services, and it's just a much more open in the sense of being able to do things. And so new aspects of this were the National Vaccine Database. It was able to come to fruition in record speed compared to traditional ways of working with IT vendors to make new databases that lots of different governments agencies can plug into. The Digital Agency also took time-consuming efforts to examine tens of thousands of laws and regulations to identify thousands of analog regulations that can be target for reform. And it's a reminder that in common law, such as the US, legal precedents and judicial rulings are used to decide cases at hand, but places like Japan in civil law, there's so many codified statutes and ordinances that rule various activities. And these, if they're written in ways that require humans to check things, physical transfer of information, well, they were just made decades ago. And so these need to be updated. And I think the latest count that Dr. Makishima will tell us about, at least 9,000 such analog regulations have been identified to reform. So we can already see there's a lot that can change. It's obviously requiring a lot of back-end grunt work to change. And so these are just a few of the aspects that we see when we focus on accomplishments. And I do have the sense, and we can talk about this in a bit, that the Digital Agency in its first year was a little bit sandwiched between somewhat unrealistic and lofty expectations by observers, saying, oh, everything is going to digitalize. Why isn't it happening yet? Versus real budget constraints, limitations of personnel, starting a new organization, and these. So I think you had a lot of challenges too. So, without further ado, then I'd like to turn the mic over to Dr. Makishima and ask you a few of the some of the important organizational mandates that you'd like to talk about, what you accomplished, and of course that includes some of the challenges you had to overcome.
Thank you very much for a kind introduction, Dr. Tsutsui and staff of Stanford University. And thank you very much for your great observation of digitalization of Japan and Digital Agency, Dr. Kishida and Carnegie University staff. And first of all, I would like to introduce the history and the roles and tasks this agency has passed through this 1 year. And during the COVID-19, we received so many voices that the Japanese digitalization is very much slow, and something should be done through the reform of organizations of Japanese government. And that was the reason the digitalization and also the digital agency should be established as the control tower of the DX of the whole society of Japan. So digital agency's biggest task is to make the the formats of the digitalization of the public sector, and also with the cooperation of the private sector and the local governments. And the services that digital agency provide will be sent to directly through the smartphones of the people of Japan. So we can contact to each person living in Japan directly. That is the very much unique feature of the public sector of Japan, I think. And this agency also, as you've mentioned, provided the vaccine record system application. And we received a very much high score. It's about 4 point out of 5 point. So we received many feedbacks and also the very positive comments when we received these services. There was so much encouraging for the staff of this agency, I should admit. And also various efforts are underway to fundamentally improve user interface, UI, or user experience, or the accessibility to deliver services for the people with the mind of the no one will be left behind, SDGs concept. And also this agency is developing and promoting a common architecture, which includes ID systems, my number systems, authentication systems, and relevant infrastructure.
Oh, great. Thank you very much. So I'd like to first take our conversation a little towards the selection of global cloud providers to provide Japan's government cloud. Might you be able to tell us a little bit about the situation of why data across local governments cannot be shared easily and why this is such a big deal to have a platform?
Yes. In Japan, there are 1,741 local governments. And these 1,741 local governments have their own systems. And also they have their own ways of working process. So when you visit one city hall, you will see how they work as that local city hall. And when you visit one town hall, the process is totally different. So you have to write down your name or phone number or sometimes gender or the address with your pen and on the paper, and you have to submit the paper multiple times to register as a newcomer of the town or the city. So many people feel the stress when you visit the local whole towns or city halls or town halls. So the improvements of the process should be realized, but the government cannot order the mayors to do some things. So it's the local system and local governance. And the only mayors or the members of the parliament of the local governments can decide the rules of that cities or towns. I think that might be similar to the rules of the states and the federal government of the United States. And the system itself is has the variety of 1,000 platforms and patterns. And each local government pays the amount of money for the system or the maintenance of the system. And also that local government needs someone who has the expertise or who can be expertised personalities or the character or the staff to analyze or organize or manage the system itself. But these days, it seems to be very difficult for local governments to find or recruit the specialties, special experts relating to engineering or programming. And these challenges should be overcome through the government cloud. So the digital agency will provide the government cloud in 2025, and we hope all local governments will join in the government cloud. We cannot order them to join the government cloud, but we hope and we believe all local governments will use this government cloud provided by digital agency because it's cheaper and it's safer. And using this government cloud, even the local government is very slow or small in the process of digitalization, the mayors can provide a very high standards of the services to the residents of the town. That is the system that we made as the government cloud. And we asked all the vendors all over the world if they are interested in organizing this government cloud, and they can go through the criteria of the government cloud, please join us. And so far, Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud Platform, Microsoft Azure, and Oracle Cloud Infrastructure were decided as the government cloud companies. And of course, some people living in Japan have mentioned these all 4 companies are global companies. And not only one Japanese company was decided to join this system. Honestly speaking, at the last procurement process, no Japanese company has joined this procurement process. So it's a very huge system and the challenge for us. So as a good buyer of the very big services, I think a digital agency has decided to be a smart buyer to choose these 4 cloud systems. And also it is multiple cloud, so it doesn't have to be only one cloud. So that might be safer for the users of Japan.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to highlight a couple of things and draw them out from what you just mentioned. So first is, I think, the background of this. Part of the reason that we have a decentralized, very local deployment of IT infrastructures at the local government level is that's sort of how things were done at the time that computerization happened to begin with. You would have a local government, you'd just contract with the system integrator of your choice and then have them build your system. And the application, platform, and infrastructure was all bundled, and it's sort of a black box, and then you pay to maintain. And everybody did this. So in a way that it was sort of decentralized to begin with, and now re-centralizing that, but in the current paradigm of having global platforms and infrastructure that can scale, and therefore it's cheaper. It's this movement into the current paradigm and current digital age, if we were. And so I think in case people were puzzled, well, why is it decentralized to begin with? And this goes back to how the whole IT industry used to be set up and the sort of digital paradigm. And then I also wanted to focus when I was describing how the procurement process worked, and it's right there on the website, right? All the specifications and requirements. Yes. It was very open and transparent. And it turns out that the only vendors that were able to and willing to fulfill all of those were the global players. But then you're having multiple ones. Somebody, one of my colleagues who's very familiar with the US situation said, oh, that's maybe better than the way the US did it, because what we did here was to get a contract, a big contract with one company, and then have all sorts of lawsuits when it shifted to another company, suddenly the big contract. So having multiple ones. So if people are worried, oh, you're just locked into Amazon or you're just locked into Google, well, you have multiple ones. And so one of my colleagues in the technology group at Carnegie was saying that's a very smart way to do it. So I just wanted to highlight that. I wanted to ask next about some of the some concrete examples of what we mean by analog regulations. So you went through and found all these things. What are some examples that you identified and things that you are going to do to revise those?
Yes, we've said this extraordinary administrative advisory committee under the leadership of Prime Minister Kishida. So this extraordinary committee decided to go through all the analog regulations that Japan has made so far. So in some countries, some ministers for digital have decided to check the laws that will come in the future, whether that is suitable for the digitalization or not. We have decided the digital agency will check all the laws coming from other organizations, ministries, and agencies, and if we will check if it is digitalized or not, or some ministers use the analog concept in the laws or not. But not only that, we've decided to check all the laws so far. So that was the hard work for us in digital agency, but we found 9,000 articles should be revised from the analog customs to digitalized technologies. For example, if we need to check the old tunnels or bridges, in some cases, still, the people visit the site and check with their eyes or knock the tunnels and listen to the voices, listen to the sounds, and write down some kinds of paper to hand in to the local governments or the ministries so far. But we do have drones or cameras or sensors, or sometimes we can use AI technologies to check these kind of old tunnels. That is one of the examples, but we have lots of similar analog regulations all over the world of Japan, and also all the industrial frames and the places. So with the shortages of the labor forces in Japan, we should switch from the people visiting the site, checking with the eyes, kind of analog, to drones or AIs. So that is the basic concept of this extraordinary administrative regulations reform.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and I think that's so important, but it's so unglamorous to go through each of these ordinances. And the big picture, I think, here is that these things were often put in to, say, increase safety or increase efficiency at the time they were written. So an example of visual inspection of the tunnel is necessary, or biannual visual inspection. Well, yes, that was perfectly logical at the technological state at the time. And now since it says that, people are stuck doing that. And so this is and so then part of the question is why was there nobody changing these beforehand? And maybe your answer might be there wasn't an agency like the digital agency that would go in across different ministries and jurisdictions to look at these. Yeah. Is that our understanding of why these analog regulations still remain?
I think nobody could tackle these analog regulations so far. So with the understanding of the situations of the Japanese society and the reality of each industry is so much severe right now. So of course, many ministers and agencies do understand the situation, very much well, but nobody could challenge to change these analog regulations to technologies. So we've announced the importance of these extraordinary the regulatory reform should be three important points. One is reform based on technology, as Dr. Kushida has already mentioned. The technologies goes up every time. So with the very much newest technology should be suitable for the sites of the real society of Japan. And that is the one thing. And also the reform for the future will be the second concept. So it is not only for the present rules or the old regulations, but also we need to think of the future when we move forward. So with this technology map, we will make the catalog for each services. Like you can use this service based on this company or private sector because these services have these kinds of features. So that can be used for tunnels, or that can be used for bridges, or the check of the parks or rivers, whatever. So with these technology map and catalog, not only global or big mega companies, but also the small companies or startups can join this technology and also the catalog. And the even small startup can find the points of the focus when they can predict the future of the technology. So these are the second point. And the third one is comprehensive reform. That is the key. So it takes time when by one, like each minister or each agency makes one law, and that law will be revised, or the new law will be made and checked and understood and discussed among the parliamentarians, and finally be passed. And that takes so much time. So using the platform as the district agency and tackling all the rules and the laws of all ministries and agencies, and by binding all the laws and rules by this agency to be revised. That is the quickest way for us to go through this reform.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, thank you for that very clear explanation. And there are several parts in that. One part I'd like to pull out and highlight for people who are interested in politics or institutions or rules and how they change. Even within companies too, it's often the case that it takes less political power to make new rules that follow existing processes than it does to change those rules once the situation is different and those rules are no longer appropriate. So analog rules, yes, of course you use people to inspect the tunnels, but as one of the comments in the Q&A is from Robert Feldman, at this point, labor shortage means that analog rules might be making it less safe because there might not be enough people. So you want to change it, but if you don't have the digital agency and the mechanisms that you described to change it, which takes a lot more political strength to do that, these people are stuck because it takes more power to change rules than it does to make them to begin with. The other point that I'd like to highlight is, and you mentioned this, digitization as a platform for startups, where once digital regulations, digital capable regulations, and the catalog of options are there, this is a great opportunity for startups who can, unlike, say, older mechanisms of government contracting, which can be very cumbersome, your track record and all of these things matter. It's much easier for them to plug in. So so the digitization of rules as a platform for fostering startup ecosystem even further. Accelerating is wonderful, I think. And so, and then you started to talk a little bit about the people making these. And so let's talk a little bit about the organization and location of the digital agency, because of course, location matters. You can't tell because of my background here, but I'm in Carnegie, California, the new Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, which is the America's oldest independent think tank. We have a new office in California in the heart of Silicon Valley. And so technology related issues and the Japan program is run out of there. So we're now, location matters. And the digital agency, when I had the pleasure of visiting you in late July, it's in a physically different place from all the other government ministries. It's an attractive commercial building, has a large proportion of people from the private sector. Could you tell us more about this?
Yes. Now, this agency has about 750 staff, and 1/3, 250, are from the private sector. It's so unique comparing to other ministries and agencies. And these staff from the private sectors work remotely, or they can join only 2 days or 3 days a week, or they are from the private companies, or sometimes they've already had their own startup companies. And some are engineers, and some are programmers, and some are experts of promotions. So we could hire so many talented persons from the private sector. That was the advantages that this agency has, I think. So I hope each person working as the staff of this agency can be creative all the time. So for the startup owner, that might be easier for them to work with T-shirts and jeans. And if it's suitable for him or her, this agency will allow them to do that. So at this agency, they don't have to wear suits unless they have to be called to attend a diet or to visit some senior parliamentarians. So it's okay with me to come with T-shirts and jeans, but sometimes some offices need to visit with suit. So at this time, they have to wear suits, but usually they can work as the free address, the offices. So there are no systematic system to be seated here with other staff of these directions, and your boss is sitting in front of you, kind of Japanese company. So it's more like Silicon Valley, I think.
Wonderful, yeah. And reforming existing well-established organizations can be very hard, but building a new organization with a very different culture, especially if it's located in a slightly different place, but conveniently accessible, this is actually a great strength, I think. So yeah, I thought that's wonderful you're doing that. One of the big strategy pillars that you had for the digital agency was this concept of the digital garden city. And this is often a framing that's unfamiliar to at least US audiences, because a garden city is more a traditional British framing of things. Yeah. So could you explain to us a little bit about what this strategy is and what it entails?
For about 5 or 6 years, Japanese government has promoted the concept of local revitalization, because many younger generations tend to move into the big cities like Tokyo or Osaka. And in small towns and villages in the rural areas, only the elderly people live, sometimes alone. And But at the same time, the younger generations living in Tokyo are interested in doing something new, or they like to deliver their ideas in the local areas, the rural areas. So the matching between the local rural areas and the younger generations who want to find the fields for challenges will be necessary in the local revitalization. And in this trend, the digitalization will be the necessary key concept to be revitalized of the revitalization of the local rural areas of Japan. And we imagine one old elderly person, female, living in the mountainside alone, and she does not have the driver's license. And in 20 years ago, she can take the bus to the town to go shopping. But these days, the bus rarely comes to that village area. And also, it's difficult for her to deliver the wine or the the bottle of wine or the rice. So she needs some kinds of the essential services from the town. And town can provide the services with the staff of the local governments, but maybe they need some kinds of private sectors ideas or the technologies. That will be the use of drones. So the drone can deliver her fresh milk and egg and newspaper, and that person doesn't have to move from the mountain village side to the big city because she does not want to do that. And she can receive the very high level of the lifestyle and the services through the technologies. That is one of the imagination that we've had and discussed through the Digital Garden City Nation concept.
I see. Yeah, thank you so much, because I was a little confused, and this makes it much clearer when we so Digital Garden City. In the phrase, it says city. So I was thinking it's about making cities more digital, allowing all sorts of interesting things. But actually, it's also you might characterize it as saying enabling rural dwellers to enjoy and benefit from some of the services such as medical care, delivery, and things that would usually only be available in a city, but extending that. So even though it's a city, where actually the target is often rural or depopulating areas too.
Yes.
So that's, yeah, thank you for clarifying that. That makes it much clearer. So we have a lot of great questions, so please keep them coming. And I can then pretend that some of the questions I am asking are from the audience when it's actually my question. One of them is, and it's halfway from the audience, halfway. So digital divide. There's often a conception that elderly people have a lot of difficulty with various digital devices. So how do you bridge that? And I have a half step further, which is, often it's the user interface that is unfriendly, not the digital device itself. So for example, my parents who live in Tokyo were applying for the vaccine, 4th time. They're using an iPad. They're filling out the digital form. It asks for the name in kanji, and then your name in the reading of how to read it in katakana, but not full-size font katakana, but half-size font katakana. And then on an iPad, there's no half-size, full-size button. So they got stuck and had to use the phone. This is a small example, but it also shows the big task, but also the big potential. They could have done that if it didn't require either half-size or big size, full-size. The developers for this put it together in record time, so it's not obvious they thought about it, but giving user feedback, and I'm sure that there was data about where people get stuck, then you can make that better. Were there a sustained set of efforts underway at the digital agency to try to bridge the digital divide in various ways?
Yes, user experience is so important in the society of the most aged country of the world. And when we deliver the services to the people as the digital agency, we think the agility will be important. So it's okay to be agile. And after receiving the feedback from the users, we can update the services and the grades of the services. And that might be important process to communicate with the users. And also the digital divide was the one of the key discussions among parliamentarians when we and I myself answered the questions from many parliamentarians at the Diet. And we've set the frame of the volunteering groups for the digital supporters. And we are asking about 20,000 people all over Japan to support, especially the elderly people or the people with some challenges to use their smartphones. It's not about the very difficult use of the smartphones or the tablets. It's about how to use the maps of the smartphones or how to communicate with their grandchildren with pictures or emoji or some smiley faces kinds of things. So if their questions are that kind of not difficult, easy ones, they can find many volunteers around them. So at the beginning, we've asked the employees of the cell phone shops, and they worked a lot for the elder people of the community. But in Japan, in very much rural areas, there are 0 smartphone shops in their towns. So we need to recruit the younger business owners or the university students or the people who have already worked as a volunteering groups at their communities to join the volunteer digital supporters systems.
Oh, great. Yeah. And yeah, it's wonderful that you have a focus on that, I think. One of the things that I noticed here in Silicon Valley is that clinical psychology and social psychology are often understood as a technology. So basically analyzing from a how the brain works type of perspective, what kinds of things are easy to understand, what kinds of things are hard to understand. And this is just my opinion. It would be wonderful if there would be seed some efforts where elderly people, what are some of the online metaphors that are easy to understand and which are the ones to avoid? And having guidelines or something like that, where many websites you go to, it's very confusing. Many apps, you go to it, it's not clear. But if there was a common set of guidelines where for relatively elderly people, it'd be easy metaphors that they generally are, the science supports that they can understand it easily, then this can make a lot of usability. And the effectiveness of the volunteers you're speaking of in the cell phone shops would increase. So that's just my suggestion. Let's pretend that a astute observer asked that question. So next, I'd like to turn to, in Japan, it's a big discussion, but from the outside, it's not obvious quite what the deal is, the My Number area. So there's a My Number card. And there's a lot of potential efficiencies to be gained by having a digital My Number card, linking it to healthcare and other kinds of registrations. But then the adoption of this isn't as fast as the government had hoped. So could you, and from the US perspective, it's not obvious what is a My Number to begin with, and what's a My Number card? What's the difference? What's the big deal? So if you might be able to explain a little bit about what this discussion is, because people will read about it in the news and they won't understand. So thank you.
Yes. As a graduate school student, I received my social security number, and I do have my own number as the used to be the residents of the United States. And also I do have my number as a Japanese. And when baby was born, my number was given to that baby. So now all Japanese have their own my number. But we didn't ask, what is your my number? As I was asked, what is your social security number in the States? Because my number was decided to be used only for three reasons: taxation, social security, and disaster management. And I think there are many layers and many multiple opportunities to use as the social security issues. But still there are some discussions when you can use your my number as a part of social security policies. So when I was in the States, I was asked my social security number when I opened my bank account. But in Japan, your my number card will not asked, because you can use other ways, like showing your driver's card, license card, or you can use Hanko as your identification of opening your bank account. So my number was not used as much as the social security number in the States. But now we're promoting and asking the Japanese people to have your my number card. This is my number card. And the difference between your social security card and my number card is we have the photo here. So you can check your photo and your face as the identification process. And also you can use this my number card as the online identification. So this is ranked the highest authentication card in Japan. But still, some people say, we don't have to have this kind of card because we have my driver's license, that is okay. But from now on, you can check your health record when you use this my number card as the medical insurance card. So you can receive more better services at the clinics or the pharmacies.
I see. Oh, thank you very much. So I think the big picture of what the debate is about is this idea of my number. The system of my number was only implemented around 2015, something like this. It's quite new. And until then, all of post-war Japan, at least local governments with your registration of who you are and where you live and who your family is was all done at the local household level in the local governments. So surprisingly, looking from the outside, the central government didn't have that much information that was in a centralized form with a national ID number system. And implementing this was a big deal. And then the question is, in order to get a lot of services linked into one handy, useful physical card or the app, did my number app, to be able to use it, well, all these things have to be linked. It goes back to our fragmented information before. And so I think the one of the core debate points as well that you mentioned is things are working okay. So why do I need this extra thing that looks like just if I lose it, there's a problem. And so it's that things worked before quite well, even without having equivalent of a social security number. And when they first introduced it, it was limited in what it could do. And now there's all this stuff we can do with it, but people have to get used to the idea that you can link it with other things. in order to get lots more to happen. So that's part of the debate. We have a wonderful number of both questions and comments and requests. And I think it's a great opportunity to cover a few of them. One is, given that there are so few children in Japan, but for mothers of young babies and children, there's so much paperwork. Are there linkages you can make to reduce the paperwork for some of the busiest people on the planet who are young mothers with the tiny babies? Are there, and this goes to a deeper question, how easy has it been for the digital agency to work with other agencies if you decided, for example, okay, let's digitize a lot of the paperwork around that mothers and babies and registering new members of the family and all of this for need to take for. So how easy or hard is it? Are there ideas or suggestion? Let's bring that up as one of the issues that we should tackle. Do you have any thoughts about that area?
Yes, I think we can use the MyNaP portal services when some mothers need to search the centers for the young children, like the nursing homes for them or the kindergartens. And for them, that they don't feel the difficulties to use smartphones or the other devices. They are digital native generations. So we've already provided the services through the MyNaP portal services. MyNaP portal means my portals kind of images. And how to search the kindergartens or the nursery homes for children that might be accessible for them, or that might have some space and for having more children or babies. So you can search the information and you can fill out the application and you can hand it them to the local government. And in some cities, you can do it. All these processes are through online with your smartphones. But still, in some local governments, you can search and you can fill out the form, but you can print them out and hand it to the local government. So it's not all digitalized, finalized process. So there are some differences between local governments, but this agency is promoting all local governments to be realized through all digitalized process.
I see. Oh, thanks. And an important prior context to that is that in Japan, at least compared to the United States, childcare for babies, nursery school is heavily subsidized by the government. So it's either free or very cheap, but you have to do all this registration to do that.
Yes.
Here in the United States, it's mostly up to private markets. So it's not a government issue. And so this is why the question comes up. Great. And so usually when there's only a few minutes left, I like to ask the difficult questions that you might not want to answer. For example, how difficult has it been to get other ministries on board? Have there been a lot of resistance or other politics where people try to use the digital agency or some of these for their own purposes? And you have to, did you find a lot of challenges in this area, or was it not as difficult as you thought it might have been? And it's fine if you don't want to talk too much, we can move to the next one.
I think many ministries and agencies are so much cooperated with this agency. I think they understand the importance of this agency, and this agency has received the responsibility to bind their process of digitalization as a control tower. So, and also we received many stuff from local governments, and they are dispatched from the local governments. So we can communicate with the mayors and local governments leaders as one platform. That is the advantages that we have compared to other agencies and ministries. So I think they do understand the process a lot. But the biggest challenge for me as former minister was to communicate with the media. And it's not easy for us to find the journalists who understand the digitalization or the technology a lot and have the skill to write them down with the common languages as the paper articles. So how to understand the DX of Japan as the status quo rightly and write them down was the very much difficult process, I think.
I see. Yeah, it must have been very difficult too, because if you're in a frame as a journalist of you're looking for things that the digital agency hasn't covered, you just look at any number of things that haven't happened yet and say, look, you're not moving fast enough, or things like this. So yeah, I'm sure it must have been very difficult. I'm curious. So now that you've passed the baton to Minister Kono Taro, but you're still very much involved in digital transformation related groups within the LDP and your local area. Where are some of the places that we should look for you to see some of the activities that you're undertaking?
I'm now a board member of the LDP Digitalization Committee, and I'm working with the first digital minister, Hirai Takuya, to support digital agency and Minister Kono Taro. And next year, Japan will host G7 summit and also G7 digital ministerial meetings. And DFFT, data flow with trust, will be the key to discuss among G7 leaders, and also cyber resilience or cyber security or hybrid war or disinformation or fake news. These kind of the issues that we face when we use cyberspace will be the hot topics because of the situation of Ukraine and Europe or the Russia. So we need to pay the responsibility to deepen the discussions of these. And also now LDP is discussing a lot about Web3, Metaverse, or NFT, these kind of new technologies. And we, Japan, cannot win the world of Web2 because US mega platformers were the winners in the era of Web2, but we are challenging the Web3 society, and we have so much soft content to be delivered and exported to the United States and other countries. So we might have some advantages to go through the Web3 society. So we are now discussing these topics too.
Wonderful. So we'll look for you in the cutting edge of some of these technological developments to see where Japan's rules, regulations, and where the LDP decides. And the important point you raised, that the digital is an area that Japan is plugging into the world in various important ways. So in terms of foreign policy and the global community of international like-minded countries around the world, Japan is poised to be a significant player in this digital realm. And so thank you very much for joining us this morning. We learned a great deal, and I'll pass the baton back to Kyo.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. If we could take just a couple minutes, there are a couple questions related to what Kenji said at the end about Japan and the global community. There are questions from the audience about how, what other countries may have served as a model when you think about digitalization of Japan. And this questioner specifically mentions Estonia, but if there are any other countries that served as a model, and also is there a program in Japan, maybe part of the future agenda for the digital agency, to help less well-off countries set up a similar project of digitalization based on perhaps the success of Japan in the coming years? And finally, is the digital agency also tasked to address climate change? Because I think the questioner is talking about how some websites consume less electricity, less energy, hence more contribute less of a carbon emission. So that sort of thing. So if you could choose one of the three questions and answer quickly, that would be great.
Thank you very much. Digital Agency has already signed the MOC, Memorandum of Cooperation, with Denmark, Estonia, Singapore, and the UK. And I visited Estonia, Finland, and Germany to attend the G7 Digital Ministerial meeting. And of course, we will learn a lot from Estonia, but the size of the population is different, and the history of Estonia is severe. So they have their data embassy in Luxembourg, and that will not be the same when we discuss the DX in Japan. But we feel the importance of DX in the cyberspace when we talked with the minister or the representatives of Estonian government. And Denmark is the #1 digital or government e-government country. So the people living in Denmark use their own My Number cards, and they log in their own portals almost every day to register many services. So we like to move forward the kind of society in Japan. And I think it's important to cooperate with other countries, and we can learn each other with the catch up many technologies. And the other thing is DX and GX can work together. I think, and this agency is also the data authority. So the district agency has the plan for the data strategy. So when the Japanese private sectors, from the mega companies to small businesses, to go through the DX strategy, they need the data to be open and analyzed with evidence. So I think the digital agency and data strategy will be one of the elements to go through the GX.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And thank you for allowing us to go over time a little bit. We learned a lot from you, Dr. Makishima. So thank you for sharing your insights and experiences with the digital agency. And for Dr. Kishida, thank you for being the main interlocutor and bringing so much out of Dr. Makishima. And thank you to Carnegie Endowment for International Peace for co-sponsoring this event. Next time, I hope that we'll be able to invite Makishima-san to the Stanford campus at some point. She's right now busy with diet sessions, but hopefully sometime next year. Or
thank you very much.
Have you here. So thank you very much. And thank you to the audience for all the wonderful questions. And Kenji integrated them very well. And I think we covered most of them. So wonderful to have all these questions, excellent questions from the audience.